11 a.m. Here you can he have a teacher and have something in Canada. First of all, we are highly appreciate your coming and joining us today, and also in prepare for our BGF G7 Summit Conference 2018. Today we don't have big room as usual because too much event at Harvard, so we try to do as a traditional venue of us that is Harvard Faculty Club. So we try to put in this room. So I hope you are not so much inconvenient with not so much a big room with the seat a little bit. Okay. And today, Governor Michael Lukakis also not so good voice because he have something about that year some days ago. But I think AI in the future will help us by if we thinking, so they will say for us, we don't have to say more, and the governor don't have to say so much more. So we are honored to introduce Governor Michael Lukakis. He is a chairman, co-founder of Michael Lukakis Institute and Boston Global Forum to conduct the conference.
You know, these days, obviously, I'm still deeply involved in public affairs and I teach full time. And I don't know where I got this serious case of meningitis. I've been told if I don't shut up, I'm never going to get my voice back. So if I have to pass off some of my responsibilities to few of the rest of you, so I can save my voice up, I hope you'll understand what's going on. I've had this now for a couple of weeks. And Kitty keeps telling me to go to a doctor. I just keep taking cough drops, so we'll see what happens. In any event, welcome. I don't think it's any secret to many of you who have been part of these discussions for a long time that I'm a very strong believer in international action through the United Nations, if at all possible, to deal with some of these problems. And one of them, quite obviously, folks, is technology, which is racing ahead of us so rapidly that we can't cope with its consequences, politically, ethically, or otherwise. So it's a special pleasure to have a representative of the UN with us who will be part of this discussion. And I hope in our own way that the Boston Global Forum can stimulate international discussion and international agreement making around some of these problems, because we're not doing a very good job of doing that, folks. And I include my own government in that. Seems to like to go off on its own and generally gets into trouble when it does so. In any event, we've got a lot to do today, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it, except to say that one of the things that we created the forum to do, and it was Twan who was the person that stimulated this, was to see if we couldn't make a contribution to the notion that if we deal with these problems, we have to do so internationally. And through the UN, if at all possible. And I hope that in our discussions today and what happens afterwards, that we play an especially important role. We've got the G7 meeting in Canada, we've got the Canadian Council with us to talk about that. But that's a particularly good time to get this discussion going and see if we can do less looking around for enemies and more looking around for constructive solutions to what we're trying to do. So let's get on with it. And it's my pleasure to begin with the introduction of the Council Chairman of Canada, who's going to speak to us briefly about the G7 meeting and their hopes for what will happen there. David, come on up. Good to see you.
Thank you, Governor Dukakis, certainly to your team as well. Thank you for the kind invitation this morning. Great to see everybody out. I do have some comments, both around the G7 Summit that's going to take place this year and Canada's priorities. Also, I'll reflect a little bit of meetings that have just been taking place over the last couple of days. Before I begin, though, I do want to say that all Canadians were horrified by the attack that took place in Toronto 2 days ago. At the same time that the G7 foreign and security ministers were meeting in the city. Our thoughts and prayers are with those killed and injured and their families and friends who have to endure with the aftermath. Certainly, violence in its many forms is not immune to any nation or community. Summits are first and foremost about the world economy. Canada's G7 Summit in Charlevoix next month is no different. We all know the G7 is not a supranational government, but it's an opportunity for the leaders of the leading advanced economies to meet face-to-face in an informal setting. They can agree to coordinate action to promote economic growth and agree on commitments and approaches to address global problems. Finally, as countries that embody like democratic values, this is a chance to address challenges to these values wherever they may occur. The primary focus of the G7 meetings is the economy. However, that word means so much more today than it did 25 years ago. New technologies and business models disrupt and turn upside down the economy, jobs, people's lives, and society. I need hardly to point out that the Boston innovation ecosystem right here is the epicenter of this economic and social transformation. Many over the past few years have expressed concern over the negative effects of the proliferation and expansion of new technologies on our economic and social fabric, including the best minds here at Harvard and at MIT. They acknowledge the enormous benefits, but they're concerned with the potential that the rapidity of social and economic change was outstripping our ability to adapt and manage the consequences. In my former life, I was premier of a province. It would be like Governor Baker here in Massachusetts. And one of the things that I often said in a very simplistic way is governments are used to dealing with this, things at the speed of sound, whereas the world is traveling at the speed of light today. And the reality that makes the regulatory perspective very difficult to keep pace with the innovation that's taking place. We now face the reality of non-state actors, transnational crime, and some countries such as Russia having exploited the new tools and platforms to undermine the very foundation of our democratic societies. But there's no point wringing our hands over this. We have to address the issue and propose measures. The G7 Foreign and Security Ministers meeting in Toronto just finished yesterday. The ministers issued the Toronto Commitments, which include a statement on defending democracy, addressing foreign threats. I would encourage you to go to Canada's G7 website to look at the specifics around it. In the closing statement, the ministers reinforced that robust democratic institutions as strong rules-based international order and respect for diversity create the best conditions for growth for everyone. The ministers reaffirmed their belief in open economies, open societies, and open governments in which inclusion, respect for diversity and human rights, and growth for everyone are valued. The Toronto Commitments set out the problem and propose a series of measures to address the what amounts to an enormous and complicated cybersecurity problem. The G7 ministers characterized the problem bluntly as a strategic threat to our society. The Toronto commitment suggests cybersecurity measures that commit to addressing the impact on democratic processes and institutions from foreign actors seeking to undermine them. Disinformation and the media, such as attempts to sow hatred and manipulate social discourse, and the actions of foreign actors using new technologies to suppress human rights, democracy, and fundamental freedoms. The document, also contains a number of strategies to reinforce society's defense and resilience against these threats, including the need for governments, civil society, and the private sector to work closely together. The ministers also addressed the security threats posed by foreign terrorist fighters and associated travelers in Syria and Iraq who seek to return to their country of origin or other countries, and made a number of key commitments to deal with these threats. There's another reality of G7 economic summits. When the leaders of the free world gather, pressure builds to take advantage of everyone being at the same place at the same time to discuss international political and security issues at the very highest level. This is a good and necessary opportunity, so long as it does not dilute the focus of the summit. At the Toronto G7 meeting, foreign and security ministers were able to cover a great deal of ground before the Charleroi summit. In addition to the cybersecurity and foreign terrorist fighters, they dealt with everything from Ukraine to North Korea, to the Middle East, to China, to people trafficking, to violent extremism and terrorists who use the internet, and much in between. So let's return to the Charleroi summit, where Canada is chair and has set forward 5 priorities. They include investing in inclusive growth, supporting middle-class jobs, ensuring progress is shared by everyone, and addressing gender inequality. Advancing gender inequality and the empowerment of women and girls as part of reducing poverty and growing the economy. Thirdly, preparing jobs for the future, a critical task as disruptive technologies change rapidly the economy and society. Citizens need to benefit properly from these advances. Fourthly, addressing climate change, the oceans and green energy with global solutions and a low-carbon future. And finally, building a peaceful and more secure world, supporting a rules-based international order built around core principles of democracy, human rights, the rule of law, territorial integrity, and the aspiration to free and open trade that benefits all, not just the wealthiest. I want to make 2 observations on Canada's priorities for the G7. All of the priorities are interconnected. We cannot make progress in one without making progress in all. What is the use of economic growth if our open democratic institutions and free elections are undermined by foreign actors? If we do not spread the economic benefits of our new economy equally to all our people, should we be surprised that citizens become alienated? Also, some have criticized Canada's agenda as promoting values in some starry-eyed way irrelevant to hard economic realities. Nothing could be further from the truth. First, values are the fabric of our democratic societies. Do you think it is any coincidence that the foreign actors who sought to damage our countries are focused on undermining these values? Second, let's take gender equality. Women represent a critical part of our economy and our workforce. Ask any woman about equal pay and equal opportunity, about breaking in as entrepreneurs, about their place in science, technology, and innovation, and you will hear just how far we still have to come to achieve an equal playing field. Failing to address this is not only wrong, it's and against principles of fairness and justice. It also undermines, in a fundamental matter, our economic objectives. Half of our workforce, with all its economic potential, must be fully integrated as part of this economic change and growth so that everyone can benefit. If I may, I'd also like to close the parenthesis on one of our economic priorities, and that is NAFTA. I was just in Washington yesterday for a number of meetings on the Hill, and negotiations at this moment are very intense. In fact, the ministers are now all in Washington, along with their lead negotiators and trade teams. It is our hope that we will find a win-win-win for North America. Canada, the US, and Mexico have benefited from NAFTA since 1994. We seek a modernized NAFTA that will support middle-class jobs and result in a progressive agreement that addresses labor and environmental standards, gender and Indigenous inclusion, and fair and transparent dispute mechanisms while maintaining North America's global competitiveness. I also want to briefly address AI. That is, I guess, the direct subject of this meeting today. Canada is a world leader in the field of AI and hosts to globally recognized AI researchers, institutions, and startup companies. Montreal is the home of Element AI, dealing with big data industries. The city also has one of the largest concentrations of AI scientists and deep learning researchers at the Montreal Institute for Learning Algorithms. Edmonton has the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute and a Google DeepMind office. CIFAR, the Canadian Institute for Advanced Research, was selected by the Government of Canada to lead the 125 million pan-Canadian artificial intelligence strategy, working in partnership with the centers in Montreal and Edmonton and the Vector Institute in Toronto. Canada's objectives in AI are to increase the number of outstanding artificial intelligence researchers and skilled graduates in Canada, to establish interconnected nodes of scientific excellence in Canada's three major centers for AI in Edmonton, Montreal, and Toronto, and to develop global thought leadership on the economic, ethical, and policy and legal implications of advances in artificial intelligence. And finally, to support a national research community on AI. Prime Minister Trudeau is looking forward to the discussions with the other G7 leaders in Charlevoix on what promises to be a focused agenda on critical economic and political issues. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. I certainly am looking forward to participating today and hearing from the global leaders who are here today to participate.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
David, thanks very much. Sounds like a very, very good opportunity for us to work with you. And I want to say to you from a personal standpoint that I found the meetings between the New England governors and Eastern Canada for me is some of the best things I did as governor over my 12 years. And I hope they continue.
They sure are.
Because governors and premiers have very common interests and often very common problems with their federal government. And
Absolutely.
it was a pleasure to work with them. So thanks for being part of this. We appreciate it. What's up?
No.
I forgot what's up.
Yeah, we talked about standard committee.
Yeah, we'll do this.
Okay, so you sit here and now Governor Michael Dukakis will present and submit to G7 Summit 2018 at Canada. BGF G7 Summit report we published already yesterday, and also now the official report to submit to G7 Summit this year. So every year, Boston Global Forum do from 2016 to 2017. The third year we do, and we hope we can contribute something good and meaningful, especially in AI for Canada and host G7 Summit government to
Okay.
We're going to take a picture here.
Just picture the official.
Do you mind getting one for me as well? If it's okay, I'm on Twitter World, so I'll do it. I'll ensure that government. Yeah, this is going to be on in Cyber World, so I have to make sure I do it then, right?
I am not on Twitter World, deliberately, but that's a whole other.
Yes.
Anyway, just taking pictures.
That's it.
One more.
Thanks so much.
So standard committee.
Okay. We're going to spend the next hour or so looking at the work that's been done already by the forum and asking some very good people to lay that program out for you, and then we're going to have some lively discussions with our amongst us, I hope, on it, and very much interested in suggestions, recommendations, criticisms, whatever. I think we have video. Want to do that?
Yep. Latvia, please.
Okay. From the president of the Leadership Alliance and the Club of Madrid, and the former president of Latvia. So let's start with that video. I'm a former president of Latvia and currently president of the Leadership Alliance, which is a body of over 100% former presidents or prime ministers of different countries. I plan to send my greetings to the Boston Global Forum Initiative, the G7 Conference, and wish you the very best success in developing recommendations and the framework for the topic of this conference, which is the ethical aspect and the ethical framework in the life of the Some of you may remember the novel, in which one had the laws of the
science fiction. The advances in processing of various computers have allowed for the sort of global mass data crunching and speed of processing. That was unimaginable before. And this capacity has changed the heuristics that you can use in developing AI applications for a variety of needs and solutions to problems that we simply could not imagine before. And just like with the rise of simple robotics, the rise and the evolution and the fantastic progress made in AI raises also concerns. People wonder whether AI will replace so many jobs that we will have a load of unemployment. They wonder about the powerful tools of, say, manipulation of opinion or intrusion into citizens' private lives could endanger not just individual privacy and individual security, but the security of all nations and alliances, such as the Defense Alliance, that is NATO. These concerns are very real, and the time to address them is, of course, before we come up with disastrous deviations from our goals, with disastrous applications that do more harm than good, or applications that fall into the wrong hands, and for which we then need to have quick benefits. Wrong hands will always be around. Any technological development has always been a double-edged sword. The first knife was a tool for cutting, it was also an instrument for hurting, and so it is with any human invention whatsoever. But even as we develop locks, and there are lock pickers, we have to strive to have better locks to keep it reasonably secure. AI is a challenge. It's scary in many ways to think of everything that can be done by artificial intelligence. And yet at the same time, the possibilities are staggering. So many things that we have been unable to control, so many things that have made us feel helpless in front of developments, in faced with what seem to be insurmountable challenges. All that could be remedied by many an application that is, as we speak, being invented or developed by either some lone individual, some lone wolf, who will come up with an extraordinary application, or possibly more likely, big corporations who have already shown the power of their research and their innovation and their creativity. Big corporations will undoubtedly make big strides in this field. But we do need already, as of this point in time, we need ethical guidelines within which such developments should remain, just as we have had ethical guidelines for any number of other technological developments, which are huge as a need in biotechnology, technology, medicine, AI, well, needs, and so forth. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope your deliberations will represent significant strides forward in that area. All the best to you.
I had a little difficulty understanding the sound of this, like some of you did too, but I think the message is pretty clear. We have work to do, and a lot of it involves ethical frameworks. So I'm going to ask Professors Tecklenburg and Savage for the next 20 minutes at least to discuss those issues with us. And thanks, come on up here and do your thing.
Thank you. Great. This is a good metaphor for what we're talking about here. With technology, you know, what can possibly go wrong? Remember which port you got to work on last time?
Yeah, right here.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that one. Are you going
I will take it. You have
I have another dongle.
Yeah.
That one is
Can we try it?
Let's try that one more time. I'll just switch. Okay, here's another. Let's try this one instead.
Yeah, we got something.
Great.
And can you just tell those, the computer to come up through the sound through the headphones?
We won't need this on there. Fantastic. Awesome. Great. So I'm Max Tegmark, and I'm a little bit too tall for this mic. Should I put the lab mic on maybe so you can hear me better? Or should I just project? Is this good? Good.
We hear you well.
Very good. So, in addition, although my daytime nerdy research is in artificial intelligence at MIT, I've also spent a lot of time in my career studying our universe. So let's start today taking a really big picture of ethics and ethics by looking at the human condition from a high level view. So after 13.8 billion years of cosmic history, our universe has woken up and become aware of itself. Right? From a small blue planet, tiny conscious parts of our universe have begun gazing out into the cosmos with telescopes. And we've discovered something humbling. We've discovered that our universe is vastly grander than our ancestors imagined, and that life seems to be an almost imperceptibly small perturbation on an otherwise dead universe. But we've also discovered something inspiring, which is that the technology we're developing has the potential to help life flourish like never before. Not just for centuries, but for billions of years. Not just on Earth, but throughout much of this amazing cosmos. Now, I call the earliest life 1.0, because it was really dumb, like bacteria, unable to learn anything in our lifetime. I think of us humans as life 2.0, because we can learn, which we in nerdy computer speak, you might think of as installing new software into our brains, like languages and job skills. Life 3.0, that can design not only its software, but also its hardware, of course doesn't exist yet. But perhaps we're already, thanks to technology, becoming life 2.1 with artificial knees, pacemakers, and cochlear implants. So let's take a closer look at our relationship with technology. As an example, the Apollo 11 moon mission was both successful and inspiring, showing that when we humans use technology wisely, we can accomplish things that our ancestors could only dream of. But there's an even more inspiring journey, propelled by something more powerful than rocket engines, where the passengers aren't just 3 astronauts, but all of humanity. let's talk about our collective journey into the future with artificial intelligence. My friend Jan Tallinn likes to point out that to be truly ambitious, it's not enough to make our technology powerful. We also have to figure out how to steer it and where we want to go with it. So let's talk about all three for artificial intelligence: the power, the steering, and the destination. Starting with the power. So I define intelligence very inclusively as simply the ability to accomplish complex goals. Because I want to include both artificial and biological intelligence, and I want to avoid the silly carbon chauvinism idea that you can only be smart if you're made of meat. It's really amazing how the power of artificial intelligence has grown recently. Right? Think about it. Not long ago, robots couldn't walk. Now they can do backflips. Not long ago, we didn't have self-driving cars. Now we have self-flying rockets. Not long ago, AI couldn't do face recognition. Now AI can generate fake faces and it can simulate your face saying things that you never said. And not long ago, AI could not beat us at a game of Go. Then Google DeepMind's AlphaZero AI took thousands of years of human Go games and Go wisdom, ignored it all, and became the world's best Go player simply by playing against itself. And the most impressive feat here was not that AlphaZero crushed human gamers, but that it crushed human AI researchers who'd spent decades handcrafting game-playing software. And AlphaZero crushed human AI researchers not just at Go, but even at chess that we had been working on since 1950. So all this dramatic recent progress really begs the question, how far will it go? I like to think about this question in terms of this abstract landscape of tasks, where the elevation represents how hard it is for AI to do each task at human level, and the sea level represents what AI can do today. The sea level is, of course, rising as AI improves. So there's a kind of global warming going on here in the task landscape, and I was very pleased to hear that you're going to talk about climate change at the G7 Summit, despite the presence of people from this country who don't want to. Go Canada. Now, the obvious takeaway from this is career advice, right? Avoid careers at the waterfront, which will soon be disrupted by automation. But there is also a much bigger question. How far will this go? How high will the water end up rising? Will it eventually flood everything with AI matching human intelligence at all tasks? This is the definition of artificial general intelligence, AGI, which has been the holy grail of AI research since its inception. It's very important to not conflate the narrow AI we have today. It's good at a few things with AGI. It can do everything we can do. So by this definition of AGI, people who say, there'll always be jobs that humans can do better than machines, are simply saying that we will never get AGI. Sure, we might still choose to have some human jobs or to give humans income and purpose without the jobs, but AGI would in any case transform life as we know it, with humans no longer being the most intelligent. Now, if the water level actually does reach AGI, then further AI progress would be driven mainly not by human AI researchers, but by AI itself, which means that additional AI progress could be much faster than the typical human research and development timescale of years, raising the very controversial possibility of an intelligence explosion, where recursively self-improving AI rapidly leaves human intelligence far behind, producing what's known as superintelligence. All right, reality check. Are we actually going to get AGI anytime soon? Some famous AI researchers, like Rodney Brooks, my MIT colleagues, think it won't happen for hundreds of years. But others, like Google DeepMind founder Demis Hassabis, are much more optimistic and are working to try to make it happen much sooner. company has as a slogan, solve intelligence. And interestingly, recent surveys have shown that most AI researchers actually share Demis's optimism and guessing that we will get AGI within a matter of decades. Which begs the question, then what? What will the role of humans be if machines can do everything better and cheaper than we can? And the way I see it, we face a choice here. One option is to be complacent. We can say, well, let's just build machines that can do everything we can do and not worry about the consequences. After all, if we build technology that makes all humans obsolete, what could possibly go wrong? But I think that would be embarrassingly lame. I think we should be more ambitious, we humans, and envision a truly inspiring high-tech future and try to figure out how to steer toward it, right? And so this brings us to the second part of our rocket metaphor, the steering. We're making AI more powerful, but how can we steer towards a future where AI will help humanity flourish rather than flounder? To help with this, I co-founded the Future of Life Institute, a small nonprofit promoting beneficial use of technology. And our goal is simply for the future of life to exist and to be as inspiring as possible. And I love technology. Technology is why 2018 is better than the Stone Age. And I'm optimistic that we can create a truly inspiring future with technology, as long as we win the wisdom race. And I thought in the wonderful remarks we heard from the Consulate General here, this point was made that we need to win this race. We need to make sure that we win the race between the growing power of the technology and the wisdom with which we manage it. That is really the key. It's not about stopping technology, it's about developing the wisdom so fast that it stays ahead. But winning this wisdom race is going to require a change of strategy. I think it's really important to be honest about this. Because our old strategy used to be learning from mistakes. We invented the traffic, we invented fire, screwed up a bunch of times, invented the fire extinguisher. We invented the car, screwed up a bunch of times, invented the traffic light, the seat belt, the airbag. But with more powerful technology like nuclear weapons, synthetic biology, and certainly artificial general intelligence, we don't want to learn from mistakes. That's a lousy strategy. It's much better to be proactive rather than reactive. Plan ahead and get things right the first time, which might be the only time we'll get. It's funny though, because sometimes people tell me, Max, shh, don't talk like this. That's Luddite scaremongering. But that's not scaremongering. That's what we at MIT call safety engineering. Think about it. Before NASA launched the Apollo 11 mission, they systematically thought through everything that could possibly go wrong when putting people on top of explosive fuel tanks and launching them to a place where no one can help them. There was a lot that could go wrong. Right? Was that scaremongering? No, that was precisely the safety engineering that guaranteed the success of the mission. And that's precisely the strategy I think we should take with AGI. Think through what can go wrong to make sure it goes right. So in this spirit, we've organized conferences bringing together leading AI researchers and other thinkers to discuss how to grow this wisdom we need to keep AI beneficial. And the last one I had was in California in Asilomar last year, and it produced a list of 23 principles, ethical principles, which have since been signed by over 1,000 AI researchers around the world. And I want to tell you about just 3 of them, set the stage for our subsequent discussion. One is that we should prevent an arms race and lethal autonomous weapons. The idea here is that any science can be used for new ways of helping people or new ways of harming people. For example, biology and chemistry are much more likely to be used for new medicines and new cures than for new ways of killing people, because biologists and chemists pushed very hard and successfully to get international bans on biological weapons and chemical weapons. And in the same way, most AI researchers want to stigmatize and ban offensive lethal autonomous weapons. It's very much touch and go. Now, if you ask your friends whether they mainly associate biology with good things, or with bioweapons, you know what answer you're going to get. And if you try to recruit students from Harvard or MIT to go work and build bioweapons, they're going to think that's disgusting. I very much hope that when we look back in 10 years, that what's happened to AI, people will similarly associate AI with new solutions, good things in the world, not with having started an arms race that makes us nostalgic about the nuclear arms race. But this is very much touch and go, what's going to happen. And it was very interesting that actually a group of world-leading Canadian AI researchers, Jeff Hinton, Joshua Benjo, and many, many others, just wrote a letter to your government urging Canada to become a champion of this cause. There are already quite a lot of countries who have come out and said clearly that they want AI to join biology and chemistry and remaining mainly a civilian effort. And I think it'd be fantastic if Canada were to be the first member of the G7 to really take this stance. We'll all be grateful for it. The second Asilomar principle I want to mention is that we should mitigate AI-driven income inequality. I think that if we can grow the economic pie dramatically with AI, and we still can't figure out a way to share this pie so that everybody gets better off, then shame on us. Now, raise your hand if your computer has ever crashed. That's a lot of hands. Well, then you'll appreciate this principle that we should invest more in AI safety research. As we put AI in charge of ever more decisions and infrastructure, we have to transform today's buggy and hackable computers into robust AI systems that we can really trust. Because otherwise our awesome new technology can malfunction and harm us, or get hacked and be turned against us. And this is significantly broader than just cybersecurity. For example, this AI safety work has to include research on AI value alignment. Because the real threat from AGI is not malice like in silly Hollywood movies, but competence. AGI accomplishing goals that just aren't aligned with ours. For example, we had in this tragic attack in Toronto that we just witnessed, nobody who builds a car wants it under any circumstances to be able to drive into a person on purpose. As we start getting computers in all our cars, there's no reason for that to even be technically possible anymore. Perfectly feasible within a relatively short time, I think, for cars to just refuse to do certain things. But our cars, our AIs today are so dumb, they don't even have that kind of elementary kindergarten ethics, built into them. That's a great place to start. And as we go a little further, think, for example, when we drove the West African black rhino extinct, we humans, right? It wasn't because we were evil rhinoceros haters, was it? No, we did it because we were more intelligent than them and our goals weren't aligned with theirs. Now, AGI is by definition smarter than humans, so if we ever build AGI and want to avoid putting humanity in the position of those rhinos, we have to figure out how to make machines understand our goals, adopt our goals, and retain our goals. And what goals should these be anyway? This brings us to the third part of our rocket metaphor, the destination. We're making AI more powerful and trying to figure out how to steer it, but where do we want to go with it? This is the elephant in the room that almost nobody is talking about because we're so fixated on near-term AI challenges, like jobs and all these other important things. But the fact is, our species is trying to build AGI, right? And what kind of future society are we hoping for if we succeed? We did an opinion poll on this recently, and I was quite struck by how most people, out of these 15,000, actually want us to build super intelligence, AI that's vastly smarter than humans in all ways. The greatest agreement was on that we should be ambitious as a species and help life spread ultimately into the cosmos, but there was much less agreement about who or what should be in control, as you can see. And I was actually quite stunned to see that there's even about 10% wanted to be just machines. And there was complete...
Have they not seen the Terminator?
Go figure. Or maybe they're just very misanthropic. In any case, there was a total disagreement about what the roles of humans should be, even at the most basic level. So let's take a closer look at possible futures that we might choose to steer toward. Don't get me wrong here. I'm not talking about space travel, just about humanity's metaphorical journey into the future, okay? One option that some of my AI colleagues like is to build superintelligence and keep it under human control, like an enslaved god, disconnected from the internet and used to create unimaginable technology and wealth for whoever controls it. But you know, Lord Acton warned that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So you might worry that maybe we humans aren't smart enough to handle, or wise enough rather, to handle this much power. Also, aside from any moral qualms you might have about enslaving superior minds, you might worry that the superintelligence could outsmart us, break out, and take over. But I also have colleagues who are actually fine with AI taking over and even causing human extinction, as long as they can think of the AIs as our worthy descendants, like our children. But how would we know that the AIs have actually adopted our best values? And also, shouldn't those people who don't want human extinction have a say in the matter too? Now, if you didn't like either of those two high-tech scenarios, it's important to remember that low-tech is suicide from a cosmic perspective, because if we don't move far beyond today's technology, the question is not whether humanity is going to go extinct, but merely whether we'll get taken out by the next killer asteroid, supervolcano, or some other problem that better technology could have solved. So how about having our cake and eating it? How about with AI that's not enslaved, but treats humans well because its values are aligned with ours? So this is the gist of what Eliezer Yudkowsky has called friendly AI. And if we could pull this off, it could be, well, it could be awesome. It might not only eliminate negative experiences like disease, poverty, crime, and other suffering, but it could also give us the freedom to choose between a fantastic new diversity of positive experiences, basically making us humans the masters of our own destiny. So in summary, our situation with technology, and in particular a situation with AI, it's complicated, but the big picture is rather simple. Most AI researchers expect artificial general intelligence, expect AGI within decades. And if we simply bumble into it unprepared, it'll probably be the biggest mistake in human history. It could enable a brutal global dictatorship with unprecedented inequality, surveillance, suffering, and perhaps even human extinction. But if we instead steer carefully, we can create an amazing future where everybody's better off. The poor are richer, 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 everyone is healthy and free to live out their dreams. But hang on, do you folks want a future that's politically right or left? Do you want a pious society with strict moral rules, or a hedonistic free-for-all like Burning Man 24/7? Do you want beautiful beaches, forests, and lakes, or do you want also to rearrange some of those atoms into computers that can enable virtual experiences? So many questions, right? But with friendly AI, we could build all of these societies and give people the freedom to choose which one they want to live in, because we would no longer be limited by our human intelligence, only by the laws of physics. So the resources and space for this would be astronomical, literally. So here's our choice. We can either choose to be complacent about our future, taking just as an article of blind faith that all new technology is guaranteed to be beneficial, and then just repeat this to ourselves as a mantra over and over and over again as we steer towards, as we just drift like a rudderless ship towards our own obsolescence. Or we can be ambitious, thinking hard about how to steer our technology and where we want to go with it to create a truly inspiring future. And we're all here to ultimately celebrate science and technology and humanity, see how we can make the best of it, right? So I feel that the essence in creating truly inspiring future should lie in becoming not overpowered, but empowered by our technology. Thank you.
Where's John?
Good morning, everyone. I am here to say that I am not a utopian and I'm not a dystopian. And I believe that our technology should serve us rather than the reverse. I also am here to say that AI, in my view, offers us many challenges, but that we can meet these challenges, and that we are not the first to address challenges of this kind. Because as we all know, every technology brings with it, provides empowerment of some kind. With an automobile, we can drive great distances at high speeds. We can avoid the pollution that was on the streets of New York City when transportation was horse-drawn. We thought, the folks at that time thought that the automobile would eliminate the horse manure problem for the city of New York. So what I'd like to do is to emphasize some points that were made by Mark and perhaps challenge others. I have on my computer, which I'm not going to connect to the system, a video that shows President Obama speaking. It looks just like President Obama speaking, but the words that are put in his mouth, Jordan Peele, who's a comedian. And it's impossible to tell the difference between the real Obama and the false Obama. And these are the issues, this is an issue that we're going to confront today, and it is a piece with the fake news that we're contending with the influence campaigns that the Russian government, according to our intelligence community, has launched against us in the past and will probably do that in the future. But I want to add a little bit of realism to the hypothesis that artificial general intelligence is possible. When we talk about intelligent computer systems, what does that mean? The first version of an attempt to build an artificial computer mimicking human memory was called a perceptron. And you took voltages, values, and you supplied them to neuron-like devices which would sum up those values, perhaps weighted with values on the edges, and then would produce a result. And when the folks who introduced the perceptron analyzed it, they found, well, it had very limited capabilities or important functions it could not learn. So as a result, neural nets in the form of perceptrons just disappeared from the horizon until people decided, well, let's revisit this subject and let's now have not just inputs in one level of neurons, but let's have multiple levels of neurons. So the first layer of neurons supplies input to the second layer. The second layer of neurons supplies inputs to the third. And then let's train it. And train it by adjusting the weights on the edges that carry signals from one neuron to the next. Sounds great. And some amazing results have been produced. There are these types of neural networks they call generative adversarial networks, where you have two neural nets, one of which generates examples, for example, examples of photographs. You have another one that's designed to discriminate between these, and it's like a competition is set up of the kind you would have where you have a counterfeiter who's trying to produce more authentic bills, and you have the police chasing the counterfeiter down. And so there is a system set up that works and will produce very unusual results. It looks very powerful. But I'm not only these days do I do cybersecurity policy and technology, I am also a theoretical computer scientist. And we have a theorem that says if you have a circuit, we call this layer of neurons, a circuit that has some fixed depth, 3-4 layers, for example, and you try to realize functions with these neural nets, the number of neurons that you will need will grow exponentially with the size of the input. What is exponential growth like? Well, if exponential is illustrated by 2 to a power, 2 to the power 10. In other words, you multiply 10 by itself, 2 by itself 10 times is 1,024. If you raise 2 to the power 20, that's equivalent of squaring 2 to the 10, and 1,024 is over a million. And if you raise 2 to the power 30, so the exponent has only gone up from 1 to 2 to 3, the number is over a billion. That illustrates exponential growth. So my point is, these neural nets have a limit on what they can do with a bounded amount of resource. In fact, I'll tell you a story. In the early 70s, there was a movie on television. It was called The Forsyth Project, as if I remember it correctly. And it was a story where Mr. Forsyth had a computer designed, had a computer that was manufactured for the U.S. government. It was the most powerful computer in the hands of the United States government.
The Forbin project.
Forbin, here, thank you. And so was it Mr. Forbin's machine? Okay. And so Forbin, his computer spoke to him and said, "There's another computer like me." And Forbin says, "No, that's not the case." He says, "Yes, there is." And he identifies the computer. And then he says to his master, "I want to be connected." And his master said, "I'm not going to connect you." So he was attached to missiles, and he launched missiles. And the consequence was the connection was made. And then you saw this data moving back and forth. And I said to my wife, "This is impossible because of a theorem that I proved." And the theorem was that if you have a computer that can do a certain number of computations per time step, then the number of computations it can do over t time steps is only t times as much. So if the workload that you need to support is enormous, you're going to need enormous time. And time means power, electrical power. It means resources, okay? So there's a limit. But what I also want to bring your attention to is there are people who've been thinking about the deleterious consequences of AI. How many have heard of Isaac Asimov's rules for robots? There were 3 rules for robots. Rule number 1, a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. 2, a robot must obey orders given to it by human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. 3, the robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second law. And it isn't just Isaac Asimov's thinking about this. UNESCO in 2005 articulated what they call the precautionary principle, which I'll read to you. When human activities may lead to morally unacceptable harm that is scientifically plausible but uncertain, action shall be taken to avoid or diminish that harm. Morally unacceptable harm refers to harm that humans or the environment to harm humans or the environment that is threatening to human life or health, or serious and effectively irreversible or inequitable to present or future generations, or imposed without adequate consideration of the human rights of those affected. Great. So that's what that illustrates is we humans have been thinking about the deleterious consequences and unintended consequences of purposive social action, to quote Robert Burton. That was the title of his paper in 1936 on the unintended consequences of purposive social action. We should all be mindful of that when it comes to these technologies. You heard Mark cite LAWS. LAWS is an acronym. Max. Sorry, I was speaking to the mic. I said that. Right. Okay, Max, sorry. The lethal LAWS is an acronym for Lethal Autonomous Weapons Systems. There is a little factoid you may not be aware of. Last year, the UN convened a government group of experts on this subject, the lethal autonomous weapon systems. They have met twice. And why are they meeting? Because and the nation states, with the US, China, Russia, Israel, we now know we can put up drones and that they can be carrying weapons, but more than that, that they can have facial recognition capability and other capabilities and can be used to kill people. They may be militants, they may not be. What's interesting is what is a lethal autonomous weapon is not clearly defined. The Chinese have put forth a definition, which I think many of us would agree is not sufficiently comprehensive. It gives them ups. We are going to now, we're entering a phase which is the governance phase of these autonomous robots. And we're going to have to solve some really hard problems. This kind of thing has been underway in the arena of internet governance, where we're trying to establish norms. There have been 5 committees of government groups of experts on information security that have been convened. 4 of the 5 have produced interesting results. The 5th one was inconclusive. But we're going to see a lot more of this. This activity requires the participation of political scientists, of social scientists, of psychologists, and it's going to require computer scientists and mechanical engineers, I'm sure, and the military. And you're going to have to, all of us are going to have to think deeply about these issues, and it's going to be very challenging. We, in my opinion, can keep these machines under control. In fact, we have to keep these machines under control. I do not feel that if I build a robot that captures all of me, that is the equivalent of having grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, John, very much. Well, apparently we have a politician, an AI politician. I've never met him. We're going to have an opportunity to do so today. And Walter, where are you? Come up here. Tell us about this Sam person.
Sam person. Thank you. So yeah, I hope the project that I'll be presenting today can kind of speak to the future endeavors set out by the earlier 2 presenters as well. And also thanks very much for this invitation, of course. So I'm Walter Langelaar. I'm an artist and academic based in Wellington, New Zealand. I'm from the Netherlands originally. And about a year ago, we started building, or we started thinking about what a virtual politician may look like. This is mostly together with my co-founders, Nick Garrison and Andrew Smith. So I'm a program director at the Media Design Department of Victoria University of Wellington. Nick is an entrepreneur and Andrew is the CEO of FlashTech, a local technology company. And basically the premise for our project asks about the status quo of politics today. So we're basically in the 21st century, but we're kind of stuck with a political system that stems from the 19th century, which is kind of, especially in Western democracies, we can see this in many parliaments today. And mostly this project stems from the various dissatisfactions around the fact that political systems are in a way inadequate to address several current issues. Some of them were mentioned in other presentations earlier as well. And then, of course, the voters, they can see this, or also they can feel this. So basically today, voters occupy a different space of thought than what their political system allows them to participate in. So for example, in New Zealand, voters participate once every 3 years. In countries like the Netherlands, I think also here in the US, it's once every 4 years. But it's kind of strange, right? It's like we want to participate in a democracy, but the chance to do so is actually only once every so on years. And what we're trying to move towards is this idea of participatory democracy, but then also in real time, sort of real-time participatory democracy. We have all the technology in place that would allow us to do so, but we're not really utilizing it to the fullest extent. So politics needs to adapt. And our premise, or one of the assumptions that we're working with, is also that politics, same as any other startup culture or technical culture today, politics is not immune to technological disruption. And we feel that rather than waiting for this disruption to happen elsewhere, we basically picked up the task and started working on it. So obviously, to set up an infrastructure that would allow for virtual politicians or a virtualized political system to exist, today there's different technical approaches or socio-technical approaches you could take. Blockchain secured voting could be one of them. Of course, personalized media consumption is a big thing already, as with the micro-targeting that we recently learned a lot more about after the Cambridge Analytica disclosures. But of course also data-driven policy, radical transparency, and more towards the topic of today, artificial intelligence. So I'll speak a bit more about the AI side of things in relation to our project. And of course on the need for ethics in this area. This is a quote from an earlier news article that came out about our project, where we stated, if as a nation we can become more aware of how AI is already being used and sometimes harmfully, and have a system in place that people can have a say about and have access to higher level perspectives generated by big data. So usually these perspectives today obviously are monetized by big companies rather than working for the benefit of the people. Then we think that is better than leaving these technologies in the hands of multinational companies like Facebook and Google, who are already influencing us. And this quote stems from before the Cambridge Analytica disclosure, but of course we were kind of aware of that situation existing already. So this kind of reality kind of caught up with this recently. So the current state of the project, we built a team, or we set up a team. Could you play this video, please? First one. So we've got, I've got 2 videos to show today also. But unfortunately, they weren't embedded properly in PowerPoint. So look at this. So turn the volume. Put down. So as with any design project, I guess, we started from a phase of speculative design. So there was a lot of thinking, a lot of research, a lot of anticipation on what we could do to make this project a reality. What you see here is part of a campaign, basically, also to make the public aware that this is something we were trying to do. And also you have to keep in mind that we just had a run of elections in New Zealand, and we were kind of hoping that we could participate in that run of the elections somehow. But of course, at some point, from some point on, if you're trying to do a campaign of any kind, you have to kind of stop it at some point, because also some of our connections were basically implying that we couldn't influence public opinion too much, because that would interfere with the actual election. So this campaign was mostly directed towards people on social media, and at this time also we started developing chatbot functionality that was deployed on Facebook and Twitter. So we had a Facebook Messenger bot and also a Twitter bot that people could interact with, and basically any of the questions or the interactions that people had with these chatbots, they already inform our system. So there's machine learning and neural nets running in the background that ingest the data that people input, and from that data, the system eventually learns better what people are actually concerned about, what people actually really feel about the political situation, or how they just switch back, or how they might want to see change in the future. So here it's also the idea that if the people themselves can better inform the contents of politics, then we believe that that might be a better situation for all. So, Sam, the project's name stems from this idea of it being a semantic analysis machine. Obviously, the infrastructure that we're proposing is much further reaching than that, but it's essentially an experiment to test the interface between technology and politics. A virtual politician, ability to interact directly with the public, so like I said also earlier, rather than participating only very infrequently, we believe that through a system like this, people can actually participate in politics all the time. So a vision for this particular project going forward is an evolving AI politician that coexists with traditional politicians, a system that drives political engagement and stimulates discussion, again, about the role of technology in politics. And this is obviously today very much on the people's minds, because we have various instances globally that basically show the people in general that technology is really influencing politics. And this is a fairly new notion, possibly at least in relation to young voters as well, who are very accustomed to the technology and the social media channels that they use, but they still have to become aware and used to the idea that they also become, or they gain agency in the political system as well. So how do you then behave through those systems too? And in terms of the social technical sphere that this project exists in, we very much work in this idea of GovTech, so government technology. Could you show the second? So here are some examples from actual conversations that take place through this system. Of course, at this stage, we're mostly only talking chatbots. So what you see here is examples of what a chatbot might work like as a politician. So the audience can ask certain questions like, how do you learn? And then you get a basic response. Why should I vote? So here, of course, audience engagement or voter participation stimulation becomes kind of like instrumentalized. It becomes a tool of sorts to make people aware that they do actually have a role in politics to play. But of course, the state of the technology, this is similar to what some of the earlier presenters said, is that the technology is changing so fast, but we as a team, we essentially made the decision to start the project and have the technology evolve around us rather than waiting for something to happen, at which point you could say, oh, now we're actually going to do something. No, we actually decided that we were just going to do the thing and then basically work with the technology changing in an agile fashion so that the system may improve over time, but that at least already the people, again, in relation to this media campaign, for example, as well, is that at least the people can already get used to the idea that maybe in the future these systems become more commonplace. Can you switch back to the presentation? So essentially here also, we moved the project out of the speculative stage and are exactly, or essentially, doing it. So as a demo of sorts, we recently had our biggest showcase so far at the D5 Summit, which was held in Wellington and Auckland in New Zealand, or actually in various locations around New Zealand. The D5 is a group of the leading digital nations of the world. So this is Israel, Estonia, South Korea, the UK and New Zealand. I think after this particular summit, they expanded to be the D7. So I'm pretty sure that after the next summit, there might be more countries involved in that as well. But we were in the fortunate occasion that we were able to have our Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, present alongside Sam, or basically she introduced the conference and or the summit and the topics and also the showcase area that we were part of. And luckily we also got her to interact with the virtual politician, and she made a nice remark saying that we shouldn't develop the technology too fast because she was afraid she might be out of a job. And interestingly also, because she's a very nice and engaging person as well, she also wanted to ask Sam a question, and she posed quite a tricky one on, I think it was, how may we bridge the digital divide? And our main developer and programmer was kind of sweating in the background. But the machine was actually able, basically the tech was actually able to answer, so we were quite happy with that. So moving forward, we have several pilot projects underway. So this is current and ongoing prototyping. Basically, we're actually doing this thing with the New Zealand government, but we branch out in a very broad manner so that we can at some point bring those pilot projects together, and together those things then become the infrastructure that may inform the system for the future. So we have some front end or consumer facing projects underway for Ministry for the Environment and the Ministry of Education. So that's kind of, they're looking to up their game in audience participation or engagement models. Of course, we also need backend functionality. So we're developing part of the backend functionality together with Stats and Z, so the statistics department. Because of course, it's nice to have an interactive system where people can participate and the system can learn from that, but we also aim this system to be trained on bulk policy data. So basically, the machine learning side of it needs to understand what political policy is also about. So that's kind of stuff that we feed it in that sense. So similar with Parliament and Parliament itself, for the Office of the Clerk and also the Electoral Commission, we're also discussing with them on how to implement instances of this technology going forward. And then an upcoming showcase will be with the Business Energy Council, and we'll be doing a bespoke demo again for the 2018 Asia Pacific Energy Leaders Summit, which will also be in New Zealand, I believe in October. So, as alluded to a little bit already, what we're currently making is basically bespoke development and implementation of various tools and techniques in the periphery of current AI thinking and practice. So I say in the periphery because we kind of utilize the fact that AI at the moment is a very favorable buzz term, but obviously a lot of what we're doing technically is not strict AI. It is actually quite a vast array of different technologies that we're trying to compile. And also this thing with chatbots, so this quote also says, the technology is very interesting at this stage, and with chatbots we already have AI that is consumer facing and widely accepted. Our project is symptomatic of that because today it's much easier to put an idea like this in front of a general audience and have them understand what the implications might be. So basically what that means is that people are already so used to chatbots on, for example, Facebook and Twitter, that going forward it becomes much easier to kind of beyond the scaremongering around AI. It is actually similar to what I think Max was also saying, that it's actually much more likely that people would be quite favorable towards these developments and actually understand, like, hey, this will be kind of a nice thing and a good thing. So that's also a very positive approach that we're trying to take, and also we position ourselves in that space. Obviously, some of the pilot projects underway again need perspectives on ethics, and interestingly, these projects that are already happening with the various government departments, they connect very nicely to the AIWS model that was put forward, or the Artificial Intelligence World Society model that was put forward here also by the Boston Global Forum. So mostly, as you could see from the examples, we would be kind of situated in layer number 6, which is the public service layer, because of these projects with actual government departments who are looking to engage better with their audiences, and like this could be education or the justice system, transportation department as well. And to close off, we have a couple of challenges in front of us, which we basically see as opportunities at the same time. So we are still fascinated by this idea of having the virtual politician actually run for the elections. So this is really what we're trying to aim for the New Zealand 2020 elections. This is not necessarily to say that we feel that this needs to happen, but for us it is basically in the spirit of disruption. We're looking for the problems, right? It's like, if you actually try to do this and people will tell you it's not possible, at least we will understand better why it might not be possible, and then we can work towards changing that for the future. If everybody still agrees, that might be a good idea. Of course, cybersecurity is a massive challenge in relation to this project. But also, again, on the ethical topic, we really strive to implement ethics by design, same as how in the software engineering a popular term is security by design. So we really believe, again, post-Cambridge Analytica, that beyond security by design, we also really need to start building systems that are ethical by design. So that's another challenge that we have, and that's all for the SAM project today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Robert. Lots of challenges there for us practical politicians as we confront this world. Okay, we're going to have the presentation with David Zwar and Ramu from UN, and then we're going to have a lively discussion, I hope, about all of this before we conclude with a brief discussion. So, Doctor, come on up.
Thank you, Governor. So we've heard this morning with a number of fantastic talks about the possibilities and the challenges that face us as AI develops autonomous capabilities. And I'm about to present on behalf of the group some of the approach that we can take to try to address these challenges, because as John said, we're in the governance phase now, and as was just said, we're in the ethical phase now. So how is it that we can develop frameworks that might be practical to be able to address these challenges? I'm going to give a very, very brief detour, though, to talk about the human brain, because it's going to be the human brain and the human mind that will help us to face the challenges that Max articulated. Hippocrates here amazingly talks about the human brain, and that even in those days, there was a realization that that is the organ of consciousness, that that is the organ of mental illness, of mental health. What we're realizing more and more is that there are circuits that underlie all of these functions. And I think the key distinction that's to be made in this context this morning is the distinction is talking about consciousness and awareness as sentient beings, subjects of experience, and then whether that's something that AI can achieve, and also what it means for us as autonomous agents when AI, if AI achieves it, and then volition and agency and our ability as autonomous beings to have rights, to have responsibilities. Next slide. Our brain has chemistry, our brain has temporal dynamics and mechanisms, and what's happening with AI now is that, and machine learning and deep thinking and so forth, is that with different sorts of setups, with different sorts of networks, that these emergent properties are emerging. And as we've heard, we're going to be faced with the consequences soon. Next. We can right now measure the temporal dynamics of the brain and use AI to crunch the numbers and feed back into the human brain signals that are based upon the information that's obtained from the human brain. So we're already in an era of the brain-computer interface. And I co-chaired a session downtown in the last couple of days on neuroscience and AI. And the issues that will abound are really science fiction issues, but the point is they become rather quickly ethical issues. Next slide. We can actually model and simulate the brain activity. Next slide. And this is the final slide before then I go on to talk about the AIWS. And I love this slide. What do you think this slide, what's the message of this slide? Just take a look. I think it's sort of self-explanatory. What is this slide pointing out?
We're all dogs.
Well, yeah. I mean, on the left is the limbic system and the paralimbic belt, which are the more primitive, evolutionarily older, emotional and attentional areas of the brain. And you see how conserved they are across evolution. But on the right, you see the prefrontal cortex that's shaded, and you see how even compared to chimpanzees, there's a tremendous expansion of the human prefrontal cortex. And that's where goals and values, that's where pro-social as opposed to anti-social, higher order processing takes place. And really what we're talking about at the end of the day is whether the prefrontal cortex wins or the limbic system wins. That's an oversimplification, but it's incumbent upon us to be able to address these issues. And that's why, from my vantage point as a brain scientist, neurologist, and psychiatrist, and my colleague Sarah Cotterill, who is a social psychologist, as was said, we need to be able to guide or at least inform these sorts of discussions with a sense of how we go from the human brain mind and social context to being able to incorporate these increasingly autonomous beings, perhaps, or entities in a way that's going to be pro-social rather than antisocial. So if I could have the next slides. And what I'm going to do is, on behalf of the group, this is really a group effort, and of course, Tuan is the origin behind it, and this is a document that's been vetted by a number of the people on the board of the Boston Global Forum. But I'm going to take you very briefly through essentially a layered model. And what Max is talking about with his Institute for the Future of Life is how scientists need to come together and regulate themselves. Urs Gasser and others, he's at Harvard Law School, in November published in IEEE a multi-layered model for ethics of AI. And we adopted the model because it addresses sort of this next step of things that need to be done for governments, for industry, for society, and has layers, higher order layers of values and ethics, mid layers of regulation and rules and norms, and then lower layers where the rubber meets the road of the sort of technology and practice and application. And so the AI World Society of the Boston Global Forum and the Dukakis Institute really aims to be able to be a voice and a convener as we are today. And after I briefly present some of these principles, the point is to hear from you and to have a discussion as to whether they seem like they're on the right track and how to refine them and apply them so that they can be presented in the larger context. Next slide. I don't think I need to go into this, but it has to do with the global citizenship and next generation democracy. Next. And here we are. Should be layer 1. Can we go up a little bit? Interesting. No, layer 1 seems to be, yeah, layer 1 is interestingly missing. And so it's always good to have some old-fashioned, non-digital things around.
Now we know the technology objects to in your friend.
Well, yes, absolutely. Maybe it doesn't want oversight. So, so layer 1 is the charters and principles to create a society of AI for a better world to ensure peace, security, and prosperity. And AI society, there's the concept of AI objects, which need to act potentially like AI citizens. And what might that mean? And how can we sync human values and rules of society and standards with AI? That's what level 1 or layer 1 is about. And it talks about AI citizens not threatening or putting at risk the health, safety, dignity, and freedom of any human, cannot take actions which violate norms and laws, must be sufficiently transparent so that it can be interacted with and understood, and sufficiently auditable and subject to regular audits without being overly constraining or controlling, so that there is this pro-social or ethical guidance rather than the opposite. Layer 2 is the ethical framework and guidelines for the role of AI in building next generation democracies, which are under threat now, and the notion of being people-centric, a rearticulation of individuals, groups, and governments that need to be using this for the promotion of tolerance. Layer 3, and that's based upon UNESCO and UN guidelines, and needs to be consonant with those. Layer 3 is standards for management of AI resources and development, and there will be a practice committee that can develop and manage and promote standards that would be requisite or would be advisable. And that's something that the Boston Global Forum and the Michael Dukakis Institute will constitute. And again, we are just a single player, if you will, in a situation where there are multiple stakeholders. But within the context of our role and our platform, the hope is to be able to be of help. Next. Layer 4, it has to do with laws and legislation. Again, we are not going to be creating those, but we will do things that promote discussion and enable the development of legislation nationally and internationally, the notion is, as was talked about earlier, that there need to be treaties and conventions. Already this is starting, and so we want to be in a position to facilitate that and to be a catalyst for that. Next. This gets to those issues and fleshes them out a little bit more. And finally, or penultimately, I should say, next. The whole issue of then how one can integrate that into policy making nationally, locally, nationally, and internationally to be able to generate smart and humanitarian decision making. And finally, you know, as was alluded to a moment ago, we want to make sure that the people who are driving the ship are not the people with the monetary incentive or the people who are bad actors. And I think one of the challenges that we're going to face is, even if we are successful at creating the broader discussion and framework and infrastructure, there are always going to be a subset of bad actors who will use this for ill. And I think we would be naive to think that we don't also have to address that, and how, as an international community, we deal with that either through prevention, deterrence, response, in addition to all the lofty things that we're trying to do to get most of the population, most of the time, and certainly the developers of these technologies on the pro-social side of human nature and the mind-brain in the future. So with that, Tuan, we can have our distinguished guests also speak.
Thank you. Thank you for a truly stimulating discussion. I really feel a bit of an interloper here because I'm probably the last surviving technologically illiterate Indian. But it's been, and this is really thanks to Tuan that I'm here, and I think all of us still are familiar with that tingle on the skin that you get when you see in real life someone whose face you've only seen on front pages of newspapers or the television screen. So it's immensely honored, sir, to meet you, Governor Dukakis. I listened some years ago to your Kimball lecture at the UN Association here in Boston, and you were speaking about the strengthening of the role of international institutions, and you made the very compelling point, which I think is relevant today, that by strengthening institutions, you do not make them autonomous or outside your control, but you, in a sense, give them the power to strengthen yourselves and strengthen your capacity for collective action. I also should pay a tribute to Miss Ripley, your third grade teacher, who urged you to run for president of class council and so led to the distinguished career in public service in the cause of the state, the nation, and the world. Thank you very much, sir. And talking about the state of Massachusetts, one also realizes that this state, whose constitution precedes that of the United States, in 1780 itself had talked about education as a means for cherishing education in the sciences. And the fact that that was articulated in a formal constitutional document, which lay the rules and paradigm, if you will, for the governance of the state, shows how apposite it is that we are discussing this issue here today. Max spoke very eloquently about the larger picture of history and where we are in this panoply of time, if you will. I sometimes feel it's useful to look at a particular day in the context of history and see what it has meant over the years. And if we take today, the 25th of April, in terms purely of human discovery, human achievement, human research. It was on this day in 1953 that Crick and Watson defined DNA through the structure of the double helix. It was on this day in 1954 that the first practical solar cell came into being. It was on this day in 1960 that the submarine Triton completed its circumnavigation of the oceans. It was on this day in 1961 that the patent for the first integrated circuit was awarded. It was on this day in 1983 that a spaceship transcended the limits of Pluto. And yet it was also on this day in 1981, 30 years before Fukushima, that 100 workers at Tsuruga, a nuclear power factory in Japan, suffered the consequences of radiation. And finally, moving it away from the field of sciences, but into the field of human discovery and achievement. It was on this day, the 25th of April, 1945, that the San Francisco Conference began, which was to define, create, and set the rules for the United Nations, and open up the possibilities that we see here today. And when Tuan this morning spoke about the relative smallness of the size of this room, it behooves us to remember that in 1945, we had but 50 delegates who worked in a space of 10 weeks to create the organization that we take for granted today. And what was the very first resolution that the new United Nations adopted, debated? It was a resolution put forward to the United Nations by the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, the United States, Britain, the Soviet Union, China, and France, and a 6th country, who I'm so glad to see represented here this morning, Canada. These 6 countries put forward what is now known as Resolution 1/1, the very first resolution of the United Nations. It is a resolution titled, "The Establishment of a Commission to Deal with the Problems Associated with the Discovery of Atomic Energy." And if you look at the text of the resolution, and you transpose, if you will, some of the terms relating to atomic energy and nuclear energy to the subject we're discussing today, artificial intelligence, you will see just how possible it is for the United Nations to be the agent of the change that we seek, or if not change, at least the instrument to be able to encourage the benevolence and the benign aspects of what we've discussed, and yet the instrument to be able to limit those which are more lethal, more invasive, more dangerous. The Commission, according to Resolution 1/1, was created for extending between all nations the exchange of basic scientific information for peaceful ends. No argument there. B, for control of atomic energy to the extent necessary to ensure its use only for peaceful purposes. Substitute AI for AE. C, for the elimination from national armaments of atomic weapons and of all other major weapons adaptable to mass destruction. And this brings us to laws of the lethal autonomous weapon systems, which Dr. Savage spoke about. There we are, a perfect home for that category. And then for effective safeguards by way of inspection and other means to protect compliant states against the hazards of violations and evasions. Something which has come through this morning and which Dr. Siblesweig very eloquently described in the 7 layers of the proposal that had been put forward by the Boston Global Forum. So here we are at the moment in a sense of quandary, because at one stage, the United Nations, the 193 governments that constitute it, and more important, the 7 billion people who constitute those governments, are working to try and achieve within a space of the next 12 years what have come to be defined or called the Sustainable Development Goals. And the fact is that each one of these goals, whether dealing with poverty or hunger or sanitation or disease or the rights of women or peaceful structures, inclusive societies, consumption, production, each one of this has the capacity to be enriched and furthered by the right use of artificial intelligence. And yet, at the same time, we see that there are 2 dangers. One, which has been discussed in detail today, the possibility of a misuse of artificial intelligence, and therefore the need, if not a regulatory mechanism, at least an open introspective mechanism, which blends together the wisdom and the power of science with the prudence and the power of governance. That is the one. And the second, and this in a sense might well be the eighth layer of our approach, is the danger that artificial intelligence will leave people behind, and so accentuate the disparities and the gaps within nations, within populations, between populations. Because if artificial intelligence is to become economical and democratic, you may not have that danger. But if it is to become an instrument in the hands of either malign political power or benign economic power for the sake of particular populations or particular communities, then we will really risk, in Max's phrase, being on this rudderless ship to obsolescence, because that obsolescence will be when countries feel that they can no longer afford or involve themselves in the process of those discoveries, and then return to means that are primeval and primitive. The other possibility I think that we should keep in mind is trying to segregate, if you will, the weaponry aspect or the defensive danger, defense and dangers of artificial intelligence with the strictly social and the economic. Because one of the problems I think that we made in the case of atomic energy, and reference was made to the more current debate on the internet, is trying to amalgamate all of these into a single paradigm. That means, in effect, that you are persuading countries or governments to retreat from an agreement on policies that they would otherwise concur because they are afraid of bringing in elements on which they have a difference. So maybe there is a case for us to reflect, and I can think of no audience or group better than this, to think of the possibility of having 2 or 3 regimes, if you will, governance structures, if you will, voluntary means of creating an international consensus on artificial intelligence. Because ultimately, when you come down to it, you may have all the artificial intelligence you will to get the data you need to be able to communicate what is real on the ground in terms of deprivation, in terms of disease, in terms of despair to policymakers. But it will be a long while, if at all, before you actually get artificial intelligence to create for you the policies that will alleviate them. Very simply put, I would suggest to you that artificial intelligence is real. It is no longer a possibility. Artificial reason is something which I do not think we will ever attain. Reason will remain within the domain of human intelligence, of human capacity, and it is our responsibility to exercise that reason, either as scholars, as practitioners, or as political leaders and governments, to be able to take this a step further. In just 18 months from now, the United Nations will be observing its 75th anniversary, 75 years from that day in San Francisco and the coming into being of the organization that I mentioned. And I think back to a wonderful line from one of the oldest educational institutions in the world, which comes from Premier Allward's province, New Brunswick, the University of New Brunswick, which in its charter said it was created so that the sons whose time of life and former hopes showed the need for formal education. What a beautiful phrase, a time of life, the United Nations at 75. And what a chilling phrase, former hopes. Because if the hopes that we had in 1945, and the hopes which have by no means died down in 2018, if those hopes are to be thwarted because of a lack of education, then we will all be the poorer for it. And this is where, with all respect, I think the Boston Global Forum comes in. Because you have the opportunity not only to talk among the knowledgeable and extend the reach of your knowledge, but you have the ability to be able to use your knowledge to be able to inspire, persuade, and change the attitudes of governments. I would even, as you know, we at the United Nations are incredibly fond of acronyms. I would even suggest very respectfully that BGF, for the Boston Global Forum, could stand for Bring Governments Forward. Bring them forward. Show them your reason. Show them your logic. Show them both the potential that they can exercise in political leadership and show them the dangers to which they must remain alive if they are not to succumb to what we very narrowly saw in the case of atomic energy, what we continue to skirt around but might well see in outer space, what we have successfully, as was mentioned, done in the case of biological and chemical weapons. All these are possibilities. And the world of 2018 has shown that there is nothing which is beyond the willingness of nations to cooperate upon and to realize. But for that, they need a measure of intellectual direction and leadership, which only you can provide. And I look forward to your doing that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ramon, for this really eloquent statement of why we're here, or I hope we're going. David, I'm going to ask you to come back up here and lead this discussion to save my voice. You know a lot more about this than I do, I hope that's okay. We've got almost an hour now, folks, to try to digest a lot of stuff here today. So come on up and take my place as the moderator. Go ahead. We've got till 11:30 for discussion, so the floor is open. Nice to welcome the Greek Consul General here, by the way. Thank you.
So we've heard about the problems, we've heard about potential solutions. We just heard a really inspiring discussion of what we can contribute. And so in that spirit, and with the multidisciplinary background of the people assembled here today, perhaps we can start just by hearing some of the thoughts and reactions or suggestions of a number of the people in the room who were not here behind the microphone. We do have a microphone that can be passed around, and I think that would be a good way or a next step to facilitate the discussion. So we can either sort of go around the table a bit, or I think just people raise your hand and if you can please offer your perspective, and in particular critiques, action items, those are the things that will help us do a better job. So whoever wishes to start, please. And if everyone can introduce themselves as well and state your affiliation.
Thank you very much. My name is Emilio Rabasa. I'm the Consul General of Mexico for New England. I want to start by thanking our dear friend Governor Dukakis, a long-term friend of Mexico, for inviting us, my wife Carmen, Alanis, and myself to this table. We are very, very happy to attend. I want to acknowledge, of course, the company of my friend and great partner, David Alward, the Consul General of Canada, who with Mexico are working in a sort of a sandwich strategy to get NAFTA done in a win-win situation. 3 wins, and not 1 nor 2, but 3 wins. Hope we get it very, very soon. And of course, my also dear friend, the Consul General of Greece, to be here. Thank you all of you for your very illuminating interventions. I have learned a great deal just in about an hour. I certainly want to underline the one by Professor Max Tegmark of MIT and his 3 points: power, steering, and destination, which, according to my understanding, it gives us a very, very good warning on the challenge of the sorcerer's apprentice and what could happen to not act on artificial intelligence. And certainly, was very important that our friend Ramon Modern, the representative of UN, reminded us about the UN compromise on development and the 2030 goals. And I want to refer to that because my country, Mexico, together with 21 countries for all continents, Argentina, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Georgia, Guatemala, Indonesia, Jamaica, Kenya, Mexico, Morocco, Norway, South Africa, Turkey, United Kingdom, Ireland, and Zimbabwe, launch an initiative in the same direction of the 7 Layers Initiative. I thought there was a common understanding of this, but I'm learning that they come in parallel, but there hasn't been too much talk between them. This was on the impact of exponential technology change on sustainable development and peace. I would be very happy to share a copy of it. It's a very short 2 pages initiative, which was presented as agenda item 177 in a session in 18 of December of 2017, approved, and now it's being discussed by all member states of the United Nations with the purpose of coming to the next step in this. I'm not going to bother you with the whole content of this initiative, but just to mention that it recognizes the vital role of science, technology, and innovation, including environmentally sound technologies that can play in development and facilitating efforts to address global challenges such as eradicate poverty, achieve food security, nutrition, improve agriculture, enhance access to energy and increase energy efficiency, fight diseases, improve education, among others. So it's all related to development as they are understood in the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. I would be happy to share this with you, and I would even be more glad to talk more about it and see if these 2 initiatives in parallel can cross and enrich each other in our endeavors.
Thank you so much, and it would be wonderful to have a copy of that. And you bring up an absolutely vital point, which is, and it's been alluded to in numerous talks this morning, that a number of groups and entities, including quite august groups, as you have just described, are on the case, which is great news. People realizing that something needs to be done. And I think it behooves us to take an inventory, if you will, because otherwise we risk having our effort be in its own little orbit where we think we're being useful, but in fact it's either redundant or not learning from best practices or not having the power of convergence that you're describing. And so I think we need to undertake an effort as part of our effort with other major organizations who've been addressing AI to really chart the landscape and perhaps even convene a conference or a mechanism to bring all these groups together so that they're not only not at cross purposes, but so that, as you say, they are synergistic. Max.
I just want to echo, I completely agree with this spirit, and to help with this, actually, we at the Future of Life Institute have put a major effort into collecting together all a web page where we put up links to all efforts of this kind that we know about. So any report or study or other document that makes policy recommendations in the AI space. So if you email me, simply at tegmark@mit.edu, I would love to both include additional things in our resource that are missing, and also, of course, point you to it so that we can benefit everybody.
that'd be terrific. Yes.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Fisher. I am a professor at Tufts and chair of the computer science department. We talked some about atomic weapons and how the UN and other agencies have come up with regulatory mechanisms, and that might be a pattern that we could follow for cyber and AI. I think it's a good idea to get international, the same kind of structure, but I caution that the properties of AI systems and cyber weapons in general are very, very different than the properties of atomic weapons. And those differences fundamentally affect how they could be regulated. One advantage of nuclear weapons, there's like two advantages, I think, as far as nuclear weapons go in terms of regulating them. One is that the devastation is so significant that nobody, there's the mutual assured destruction, visceral, we don't want to do that. Everybody doesn't want to do that. And secondly, the nuclear materials that are necessary to build nuclear weapons are things that are actually relatively easy to keep track of. Cyber weapons, in contrast, the damage they can do is much more subtle. Like, for example, the fake news hacking where gullible or persuadable voters were influenced in how they would vote, much more subtle and much more is that free speech? I mean, is it even wrong, right? So the ethical questions are much, much grayer. And then the ability to track and understand who is doing it, is it happening at all, is much more amorphous. Right, we talked about regulating cyber, AI weapon system laws, lethal AI weapon systems. And I think the image that comes to mind is the Terminator or a drone that has C4 explosives attached to it. But a completely different cyber weapon is one that infiltrates a power plant and causes it to explode or just not to work. Right? We saw with the attacks in the Ukraine where the power grid was taken down at the same time a call center was taken down. Those are also cyber weapons, and right now they're mostly written by humans, but it's pretty clear the trajectory will be such that those kinds of things will be AI enabled and driven in the future. Even detecting that such a thing is happening is really difficult, and so the regulatory frameworks it's much less obvious how to even notice that something is happening in time to do anything about it.
So crucial point, and I guess that underscores the importance also of deterrence, because we won't know certain things until they happen. And I think we heard the importance of hacking, interesting. The importance of having the thought leaders in the fields scientifically be engaged. I think you as a chair of computer science at an esteemed university, together with your colleagues and like John Savage, who I think is about to speak, will be really important in guiding this effort, because if it's not guided by experts and informed, then it will be certainly naive and less effective. John?
Thank you, Catherine. Weren't you a program manager at Dover and you directed research in this area? Okay, so you are an expert. My view about experts is you should always listen to experts when you try and formulate policy concerning their subject matter. On the matter of nuclear and AI, there was an interesting report that I saw yesterday that said that RAND has produced a new document in which they assert that if you can use AI to identify the location of missiles, for example, that might tilt the balance and be seen perhaps as a move toward first strike capability. And they are warning about that. You want to mention that, Tom? Go ahead, please.
Yes, a very good article that I recommend. I'm Tom Crewley. I'm director of the Ethics and Emerging Military Technology Graduate Certificate Program at the Naval War College. Currently, we have 17 candidates in the program, and we look at how technology can be weaponized from AI, information, bio, neuro, and etc. We have 2 students currently that are writing papers, research papers on the ethics of autonomous decision-making, standalone or with human interaction. These are students that will be taking mid-level to senior level command positions in the decision-making process. We started this program 2 years ago, this coming fall, because we see the critical nature of what we're facing as a nation, as a world. And Dr. Lewis Duncan and I have worked with this to get our students to think in unconventional ways about the impact of technology, what can be weaponized, and how does it affect humankind in our society. So that is our project at the War College. And the next project it would be, hopefully will be next year. I'm working with the group, the Episcopal Bishop of Rhode Island. We're looking to have a global religion, ethics, and technology summit here in Boston next summer, hosted by MIT. Looking to host that to talk about the impact of technology and religion and ethics. So that is another initiative. But I think it's important when I mention to people out in society, they say, what do you do? I said, I'm Director of Ethics and Emerging Technologies. And they look at me like, what are you talking about? Ethics. So, I think this conference was quite important, summit, in order to help spread the gospel of what we need to be looking at, find some sense of intellectual as well as human capacity for playing ground for people, and some sense of moral responsibility across the globe.
That's an extraordinary program. And again, to be able to incorporate these reports, these programs, these people who are becoming expert in this area. And we've heard, how to address the weaponization. We've heard from our colleague from Mexico about how to address sustainability and the good values. And it's going to really be those two, antisocial, pro-social, that are going to both have to be advanced and connected as well. Other points that people want to raise or bring up, please.
Well, good morning. My name is Betsy Hodges. I am the former mayor of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and currently at the Institute of Politics at Harvard. I'm not 100% sure how I arrived at this table, but I'm very grateful to be here. And I am a layperson, and I approach this a little bit like most of us when we watch, Olympic figure skaters. I can see the level of expertise and talent. I have learned a lot in a short time about how to assess what's coming forward, as we all learn to assess the skating we see in the Olympics. But I'm aware that I'm with a lot of Olympic level people in this field. But a couple thoughts that I had as a layperson that I think, and somebody who has actually governed. As a layperson, a couple thoughts that I had, one is very general, and then another is specific to governance and this idea of my gratitude that layers 2, 4, and 6 all approach the idea of policymaking and governance. The general one is there's a variation in the level of discouragement about the state of humanity and about the capacity of humankind to do good versus not good. And I would guess that the level of discouragement one holds about the capacity of human beings contributes to whether one sees artificial intelligence as corrective for the deficits of humankind, assistive for the good bits of humankind and helping us do better at the things we're good at, or some combination thereof. But I think that, this, and I think that slide where 10% of people think the machines should take over, I think those people are very discouraged about humankind. And so the fact that today is the anniversary of the discovery of DNA is interesting because how, that DNA, those essential building blocks, and please keep in mind I'm not a scientist. If I'm mangling your metaphors, just please take the spirit and not the letter. But that idea of the DNA that goes in, as we're thinking about that unnamed layer 8, that unwritten down layer 8 about disparities, the DNA of this country has written into it issues of race, issues of gender, issues of class in our founding documents, we're the only founding document in the world that mentions arms, that mentions weapons. That's built into the DNA of the United States of America, and we've been watching that play out in a variety of ways over the last couple hundred years. And the DNA that we build into both artificial intelligence, but also the conversation about it, is really important. And I think if we aren't explicit about the ways that our own bias and our own formulations around race and gender and class and other disparities play themselves out and could play themselves out, they will unconsciously play themselves out in artificial intelligence as well, because at the moment it's human beings who are doing all of that writing and all that determining. And so these very human, very basic, everything that discourages us about human beings is going to be present in the creation of artificial intelligence, whether we like it or not. And so I think making it even more explicit that we are aware of that, and that it is our duty to, I don't know if we can make it corrective, but to take the best of us and put that in there, and be aware that we prefer the worst of us not to arrive there as well, will help decide whether or not we have Skynet, right? Or whether we have sort of really great assistance in governance and governing. And then that question about governance and governing is so important, because I think most people who are in elected life do not see themselves as simply repositories of the average of what their constituents believe. And that in this country, if we had governed as though our only role were to take the average of our constituents' belief and represent them in our roles, we would not have had, for example, the Civil Rights Act. We would not have suffrage in the United States, and kudos to New Zealand for being the first country to allow women to vote. And so that, I think, has to be built into this question of governance as well, is this question of leadership and what we actually expect our elected officials to do and whether we think of them as leaders. And that's true at the local level, it's true at the state level, it's true at the national and the international level. So that's a layperson's, plus y'all are really cool and doing really interesting and amazing things. This is not a critique, it's just an offering from a layperson.
Well, you keep saying layperson, but in fact you have governed, as you said, and you're now here at Harvard. And so I think to be able to have your voice as part of this discussion is critical. So thank you for those points. Other points that people want to make? Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I'm Carmen Alanis. I was a former electoral judge in Mexico. We have very strong electoral courts in Latin America. So we deal not only with electoral results, but also with political rights. And we are discussing the electoral courts and electoral management bodies around the world this topic, because technology does not stand still, and nor should democracy. So the debate is, or the question is, that if social media or big data is threatened democracy, and what we should do. And it's very good to be here, and thank you very much, because I also met Mr. Guyen in San Francisco. We were invited by the Club de Madrid, and I also participate with the Kofi Annan Foundation, and they are putting together a new global commission to deal with this topic. But the conclusion we are reaching is that we have to go to basics to protect basic principles such as equality, inclusion, accountability, and transparency. But what is the most difficult activity we have before us or in front of us? can we regulate the activity on social media without threatening freedom of expression? That's the main thing that we have in front. We have the example of Germany or Mexico right now. Germany, they regulated fake news in social media, and if they don't take these fake news out of the space, they fine the companies. Or the opposite, in Mexico, the Electoral National Authority celebrated agreements with Google, Facebook, and Google, and Facebook, and the third, Microsoft. And together, they are putting down fake news, which affect the electoral management of the polls, and immediately the electoral authority spread the good information. So these companies are helping. They want to do something because they are good tools for the strengthening of democracy. So talking about international standards and principles, we don't want to forget the basic principles and standards. And I think that one specific activity we have to do now is to find out all the efforts that are done or are being done now from different agencies at different stages, because what we need is to regulate this now. It's urgent, but we are doing separate efforts all around the world.
Sure. Your points also bring up another really important point, which is how we can deal with the problem or the issue of autocracies that are spreading and apparently successfully through fake news, but also through strong men, and dictators of various sorts, and who have no incentive, and in fact the opposite incentive, right? So the difference between democracy at its best anyway and the autocracies is only going to be magnified because of the way it's being played out with AI right now. And I think we'd be naive not to consider what points of pressure or accountability we might bring to bear on governments or actors who don't uphold those same values that you're espousing. Yes. Oh, sorry. Please.
I would just like to thank Governor Otakakis for bringing us all together here. I think this conference sends a very strong message that alone we can do very little. The problems are overwhelming. There is a lot of common work to do. Unfortunately, human experience shows that we regulate too late and after the problems have appeared. So I would like to praise this the preemptive role of this conference, because you raise awareness, and it's very important to discuss all these issues. And I think a very important domain on which we should work in the future would be how artificial intelligence could help us tackle environmental problems. So thank you very much for this great conference.
Thank you very much. Back to our computer science chair.
Yeah, I wanted to comment about the autocratic states and the ability or the capability that machine learning, artificial intelligence, plus the Internet of Things and social networking provide to do very detailed surveillance of targeted individuals, right? So with social networking, you reveal a vast amount more than you think you are. But then when you have a device like Google Play or Siri, or there's an ability to listen to you, what you're saying all the time, and the companies are using it for a particular purpose in a way that they claim they're not spying on you, which I kind of believe, but it's not clear that countries that are more autocratic and where those services are provided by essentially government corporations have the same ethics. With the Internet of Things, there are now cell phone apps that embedded in newsreaders, for example, like the ESPN newsreader has this feature where if it goes into a location where there's an RFID tag, it will track, oh, this person was here. Right now, there are only about 60,000 locations where those little RFID tags are watching if you're walking nearby, but there's no reason technically that couldn't expand so that you could essentially be 24/7 under surveillance in your own home and other places. And that would typically produce way more data than a spy agency could do anything with. So why bother collecting it all? But when you have machine learning and AI technology, you can focus in relatively quickly on the dissidents, the people who might be voting against you, and to basically massive surveillance at scale. And so that's another element of the ethics of AI that I think that we should be thinking about as a group.
It's deeply concerning, and the whole issue in China of social credit, that people are being allotted based upon certain scores, based upon essentially surveillance and other things, that then determine whether a person can get a train ticket to go to the next province, or let alone a plane ticket, or get insurance. So we're there. And I think that the ability to be realistic and preemptive, or at least active, despite formidable challenges, is going to be something that's called for. Please.
Hello, my name is Beatriz Medino, and I have very kindly been invited by Carolyn Kakis. I'm completely late on technology. But as I have heard all the proposals, it seems to me like in these
could
areas.
you please describe your position, because you in Guatemala?
No.
Peru, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm a Peruvian, and I held several positions in my country in public service. Also, before in the private sector, I'd say I was the head of the IRS, a lot of IT there. And Peruvian IRS, of course, customs. I was parliamentarian, both in the Congress and in the Senate, and I held a position as the National Ombudsman and Prime Minister. So that's a long career enough. And I'm here as an Ali Fellow at the Harvard Advanced Leadership Initiative that is held by Professor Elizabeth Cantor. And I'm very happy to be here with all of you, learning from you today. It seems to me like I was thinking while listening to all of you that ethics certainly has to do with democracy, human rights, transparency, freedom of speech and all. And I was wondering how we're going to deal with this, like former mayor said to us, in the sense that we have ample examples of lack of leadership of humans in government, in the private sector, and even NGOs. So my thought would be, it seems to me like technology has gone faster than ethical frameworks for even human beings. So even though religion and laws and treaties have tried to regulate ethics for human beings, so far, I don't know that they have been successful or completely successful. And even religions have had their own ethical problems. And so I just think that this is a wonderful effort by the Michael Dukakis Institute and Global Forum to provide all these layers, to try to put together. But it seems to me like we're going to have to go and pose that regulation effort in the right hands.
Yeah, and I think the issue of which body or bodies become the repository and the drivers is really important. I think we, heard about the UN, and of course that's a natural, and so these are the things that are going to need to be sorted out so that there are convergent efforts and credible platforms to be able to do the regulation without undue hampering of freedoms. Other points, please.
Good morning. Derek Reveron, member of the Boston Global Forum and professor of national security at the Naval War College. I think one of the most interesting things is sort of take a step back, and David, I appreciate everything you've done too as a psychiatrist to sort of think about our underlying motivations to even create, something like AI. And I thought during Max's presentation, the importance of values is, I think, as a political scientist, and I'm glad, I don't want to speak for the politicians, so I'll be the layperson here, Madam Mayor, on politics. It's really, politics to me is sort of contesting values or understanding values. And as I was Googling to try to find a source of this, and maybe it's so common now, but as we think about AI or cybersecurity, this whole question about, if it's the globalists of Silicon Valley versus the authoritarians of pick your capital, or, where that might occur. And that's sort of the fundamental question that, we know there is, I don't want to use the arms race analogy, but there are governments, companies, which we didn't quite address, who are major players with competing values on this important question of AI. And so to me, I think it's essential. And, again, I applaud BGF and the Michael Dukakis Institute for bringing such a diverse group of people together and maybe think about the different motivations that's driving the pursuit of AI. And so whether it's just the basic dissatisfactions, with life, or is it the technologist's dream, and then how we reconcile that, right, as human beings, because we can look at, when we think about whose values, I guess to me is the fundamental question. And we can take, something like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's highly contested as it's implemented. And so even starting with that notion and this idea, I'm going to check out Sam more to understand how it works, but trying to understand, we can in these other examples, like the Declaration for Human Rights, and we agree, but we can recognize today vast differences in terms of how it's interpreted by governments and organizations and such. So I'll just leave it with whose values.
Yeah, hugely important. I'm wondering, Dr. Cotterill, because your expertise is in the intersection of social psychology and politics, if you could just give us an initial sense of where you see those lenses contributing to this dialogue.
I had a bit of a related question. So I'm a social and political psychologist here in the Department of Psychology at Harvard. And as a psychologist, I think in part a lot about psychometrics, which is how do you accurately measure people's attitudes, their beliefs, their traits, and so on and so forth. And we saw some evidence that people seem actually be optimistic about AI, the general public does. That's perhaps encouraging from your point of view. But I found it a bit surprising, and I wondered how exactly the question was asked and who the respondents were, with an eye towards the possibility that maybe, basically what are people thinking of when you ask them, how do you feel about AI? What does that mean to people? And that if you had asked the question a little bit of a different way, perhaps you'd see quite a bit more hesitation about technology, potentially even pessimism about technology. And also who the respondents were. So, if we're asking folks here in Boston, we might see people might show very different, attitudes about technology than if you ask folks around the country or around the world. So I think if we're thinking about ethics, there's a bit of a moral imperative to consider, what are the descriptive norms about technology? How do people think about technology? How do people think we should proceed in these sorts of domains and get a little bit of a better handle on the public's perceptions of these technologies.
Thanks for neighbors. I would love to talk with you offline. I would probably doing a real proper survey.
Great. Please, yes.
Hello, my name is Hyungjin Won. I'm a South Korean violinist. I went to Juilliard Music School. And what I'm doing recently, actually it's been for 9 years that I'm trying to unite our two Koreas through music. One orchestra between North and South Korea through music. And I'm a music director of Lindenbaum Music Festival. I just want to make sure one thing from a musical perspective regarding AI. When I think it was like last year or 2 years ago when AlphaGo came to our country and played with chess with one of our best chess player, Mr. Lee. And we saw he lost. And suddenly, people from all fields, like doctors, lawyers, and even including musicians, we thought, okay, we might be losing our jobs in the future. But just one thing, I'm in my mind, we, for example, we go to see the concerts, and we go to a museum to see beautiful paintings, and we go to movie theaters to see movies. It's because human beings, we are impressed. After hearing, after seeing the movies. And in music, human beings are impressed by sound, which is, music sound. It's because music touches human souls. So in other words, those AI can play perfect. They can play like perfect rhythm, perfect intonation than any human musicians, players. But I don't think perfection, it doesn't mean that it can impress human beings. Which refers, if you hear like Vivaldi and Johann Sebastian Bach music, it all came from Baroque music, which is also referred to misshapen prose. When I studied this in music history, I didn't understand because, like Vivaldi, Four Seasons, Bach, those musics are perfect. But we historians, we recall those music misshapen prose. And now I understand why, because nowadays we try to listen LP sound rather than digital CD because we feel like we are more impressed by those sounds which is not perfect. So I wouldn't worry about in the future because we human beings are definitely more impressed by not perfection.
So thank you for bringing those really important points. And of course, the universal power of art. We're doing work with the Berklee School of Music. That'll be interesting to talk about music and healing and so forth. And I think that AI will be in all, and already is in all domains. And we have to keep perspective for sure. Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm Marika Lakia from Harvard, and I used to teach at the Tokyo University. So I bring in the lens from Japan, and then also a part of Post Global Forum as an international council member. Been working closely with Tuan in the last years or so, and thank you so much for wonderful effort that he never sleeps. I said, his email comes to me 2 o'clock morning and 5 o'clock morning. So even when I'm traveling to Japan or Tokyo, I'm constantly checking his email and see what's happening. So thank you so much, and then because your wonderful leadership that we are able to really learn and influence the audience around the globe. So I am in the academia. It's always the tension between regulation, what is happening, like dealing with AI, but the other side is innovation. How we can really foster and bring the student young mind that they can aspire. Like Max said that there is a wisdom race that we wanted to perhaps the forge for the platform that can distribute for income and then to boost for the equality for the gender and then other aspect of dimension that our human race has created. So giving that the tension of we have to control some aspect. Yes, that can take to the national security issue to bottom line of really dealing with kindergarten up to the K-12, the higher education. And then other side, there is endless competition in the private sector, and then to even the higher education now. We are constantly reminded how we can really collaborate with the industry and the civil society and higher education. I know next week in Beijing, there is a huge conference, global conference, gathering all the president of higher education, some of the top university to deal with these issues. And then I understand that the UN and then Mr. Hoshino, used to be my colleague, is hosting this area of IT and science. So I really wonder that in the spirit of Tuan and Mr. Dukakis, you've been really spearheading this area of creating norms and framework of AI, but really bringing this notion of global citizenship and make sure that the crafting of this framework and then apply it in the delivery, whole arc of process that we have to go through. And there is a very important space that the UN can definitely take. And I'm very much optimism, but I very much want to be a realist to make sure that, coming in a few months that we have a Canadian representative and a Mexican in the UN. What can we really do? Because after this tomorrow, I'm very sure my email will be boosting from Tuan. What action we can take in a few months, a few weeks to come. So it will be really helpful. I really want to be helpful to you, Tuan. That what immediate action that with MIT side and other colleagues sitting here today, we can really come together. Make sure that recommendation that we submit to G7 Summit will be really viable and then timely, that the people can take to the next step. So that's one of the suggestion and the comment that I'd like to address.
Yeah, the whole issue of action items and momentum and this, and I think Tuan and Governor Dukakis smartly, aimed this towards the G7 with the notion that there's a proximal next point of ignition, if you will. Please, there's another.
Hello, I'm Llewellyn King. I'm a journalist. Usually discussions of artificial intelligence, or those I've been privy to, have focused on jobs. Today we talk about politics and the influence on politics, but nothing influenced this politics faster than jobs. So the first wave of change coming from AI might be in the job market, and that will very profoundly and very quickly affect the political world, because nothing causes political instability faster than the loss of jobs and large unemployment, which would be one of the consequences if AI is not well managed, and if it does not itself turn out to be a job creator rather than a job confiscator. Thank you.
Yeah, incredibly important point, and I think that the risk of quote intellectual elites discussing something is that the consequences of not attending to these things are profound, as we've seen. Yes.
Jonathan Blackwood, I'm a journalist as well, much less accomplished than Mr. King. However, I write for trade publications. I've covered artificial intelligence as it actually works in the world today, and mostly in call centers from what I've covered in the past. So I have actually a couple of questions specifically for Professor Tagmark and John Savage. Does it preclude AGI and superintelligence and artificial intelligence isn't superintelligent in all facets of intelligence? Essentially what I'm asking is there a future of this utopia that you've kind of outlined where we're not talking capital G gods that are enslaved, but lowercase g gods where they're super intelligent in their own medium, but we don't need to give them perhaps, like the gentleman said earlier, they're super intelligent as when it comes to biology, but not when it comes to music, they're ignorant of such, or is that impossible? Does AI and reaching AGI need to have artificial intelligence that are super intelligent in every single category?
So I'm not going to give any short, glib answers here, and I'm not pushing any particular vision of the future either. I think the key takeaway here, rather, is we have to be open to the idea that even though that artificial intelligence might very well succeed according to and ultimately be able to do all the things we do, and I think the really interesting question isn't to ask, what is going to happen to us in the future as if we're some kind of pathetic, powerless, passive bystanders, or to quibble about should we worry or should we not. The really interesting question is, we have this incredible panoply of possibilities, right? So for us to ask ourselves, what sort of future are we hoping for? Have the kind of conversation that you here at World Global Forum are encouraging us to have ahead of time. And then ask, what concrete steps can we take now, that are going to make it more likely that this will be our future? And I'm quite optimistic that the more we think about what sort of future we actually want, what sort of future society we want, and the more likely we are to get it.
So Max, you get the last word then. It's a great way to end. We're at 11:30 and I'll hand it back to, I'm sorry. The penultimate point.
Yeah. I wanted to throw my 2 cents in here,
Please.
which is that let's suppose you've put into artificial intelligence systems all the known intelligence of mankind. And then we make a discovery, if the humans, that is, and not the machines, conduct experiments. They go out into deep space, so they find a range of radio frequencies that have never been used before, and they detect something that was never known before. Can the AI systems cope with that? My answer to that would be probably no, because they've not been trained. To assume that you have artificial general intelligence is to assume that the software, which is what it is, has a will of its own, that there's a creative element. We, at the neural level, we have synaptic connections, and almost certainly the actions that our neurons take are determined by quantum mechanics, which means there is randomness in there. Are we going to put that kind of randomness into our neural networks so that they are constantly changing? I don't know. But I have a deep suspicion that the intelligence of the most intelligent people will never be fully encompassed in the AI system.
As a brain scientist, I'm not going to answer that, actually, because it would be provocative.
Great. Thanks. Thanks so much, David.
All right.
Thanks, David. Thank you so much. When Twan came to me to pass a handful of people and said he wanted to put this together, I think one of our hopes was that being here in Cambridge, in the Boston area, that we would be able to bring together not only folks who were here more or less permanently, but really outstanding people who come to Cambridge. And we've had a series of meetings, and I think we've done some good things, but I think this is one of the best meetings we've had. And in part because we've been able to bring a mayor from a state that voted for Dukakis in 1988.
I cast my first vote for you, sir.
Thank you. Catherine, thank you. And if you see a good-looking 6'4" freshman walking around the Tufts campus named Nico Hereford, that's our grandson, just finishing his first year and having a great time at Tufts. He's also a tennis player. So just say hi to the former prime minister of Peru, a place that I was lucky enough to spend a summer in back in 1954. Only to discover that the Greek and Spanish accents are identical. So while I didn't speak the language, I had a fabulous accent. And thank you for being with us. And our friend from South Korea, where I spent 16 months, not voluntarily, but a great learning experience in many ways. And for what you're doing, I hope we can all do. I think one of the things that just continues to impress me, folks, as we meet together, is just how important it is that we think internationally. That is not always the case here in the United States of America, as well as other places. I don't want to get into lots and lots of issues, but you know, this country is about to spend $1 trillion on something called nuclear modernization. We've got 4,000 nuclear weapons, 50 of them will destroy the planet. And I thought we were trying to get rid of these things. And here we are, frankly, embarked on another arms race, no question about it. The Russians respond with weapons and so on and so forth. I think it's just so important. The message was just so well put. If we're going to solve these problems, folks, we've got to think and act internationally. And I think that's one of the things that the BGF can help to do. Because if we don't do that, then all this is going to be a lot more trouble than it is today. And that's not what we're about. You know, as most politicians, I hope, I'm an inveterate optimist. If you don't think that good people working together can make a difference, don't go into politics. And this is an important moment in history. 5/6 of this world is conflict free. It's never happened in the history of mankind. I think that's something to think about and be energized by, even as we go to work on the other 6 and some of these issues. But I'm just tickled to death that we've been able to bring you together. And a guy who nearly flunked physics at Swarthmore College, decided he's not going to be a doctor and went into politics instead, can at least begin to try to understand this thing. And I will tell you, without the Boston Global Forum data, I didn't know what AI was. I had very little sense of what it's all about. So a huge thank you to all of you, especially to you and your staff for making this happen. And it sounds to me as if there are great possibilities moving ahead as we collaborate with some of the other things that we've heard about here. So thank you, thank you, thank you. The next time I meet with you, I hope I'm going to have my voice back. We have just one more thing we want to do before we wrap things up. And that is to make an award of the world leader in artificial intelligence, AIWS. And my Mexican friends, that they left us know, gotta help me. Is it Angel Gurria? Or Gurria. With a double R, right? Angel Gurria. Who is the Secretary General of the OECD, but has taken real leadership in this area in many, many ways. And I hope you will convey to him, we've got a video of him, I hope you will convey to him the importance of his leadership, of the OECD's leadership in moving forward on this. And it's the reason we want to recognize him here today. Do we have the video? Let's watch it.
Distinguished ministers, professors, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to receive the World Leader in Artificial Intelligence World Society Award. My sincerest thanks to the jury of the award, to the Boston Global Forum for organizing the ceremony, and to the dedicated team who have been working to advance the artificial intelligence agenda at the OECD. We're living in an era of fast-paced digital transformation. A broad range of technologies are reshaping our economies, are actually reshaping our societies at large. But if we had to choose one transformative technology that has the potential to significantly change the world as we know it today, it's likely to be artificial intelligence, so-called AI. It's even become a bit of a household expression, household name, AI. AI is expected to dramatically improve the efficiency of decision-making, save costs, enable better resource allocation in basically every sector of our economy. It promises to boost productivity and address complex challenges in health, transport, security. But of course, nothing comes for free. We know that the rise of AI also presents important challenges to our government, to our societies around the world, and practically in every aspect of our life. But let me focus on a few of them. The future of work, skills. That means it has to do with people, with individuals, with us, with me. And then there are some broader issues like access to data, the protection of personal privacy. There's the question of liability, of safety, of ensuring transparency and accountability. How we read the news, it looks like every day there's a news story in the news about AI and about automation. How some of these stories are good. They tell us about the bright side. Some not so good. They tell us about the dark side. And I believe there's a genuine shared anxiety as we head into uncharted waters. Now, the OECD is well placed to help governments tackle these challenges. For many years now, we have been supporting discussions on AI at the G7, for example. We've been specifically asked to support the multi-stakeholder dialogue on what we could call a human-centric AI, human-centric artificial intelligence, one that can promote inclusive growth. Now, last October, we held a major conference on AI. It was focused on, quote, intelligent machines, smart policies, unquote. And there we discussed how the speed of development of AI is bringing urgency to the policymakers' task of shaping this human-centric, human-centered approach, human-focused approach that we're talking about. So we continue to analyze and measure this phenomenon, and we actually plan to launch an observatory on artificial intelligence policy early in 2019. Most importantly, given our convening power, we're leading a concerted, multidisciplinary international effort to discuss guidelines for artificial intelligence in society. We already see valuable sets of principles on artificial intelligence emerging from different spheres of government. Here we are talking about not only different ministries, but also talking about national governments, regional governments, state governments, and of course, even cities. You're talking about business. You're talking about NGOs. And all of these together provide a fertile base from which we hope to build international consensus on these key principles for public policy and international cooperation on the issue of artificial intelligence. So, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, only a few weeks ago, the world lost one of its brightest minds, Stephen Hawking. When talking about the future of humanity, Professor Hawking often warned that artificial intelligence would, quote, either be the best or the worst thing ever to happen to humanity. So there's a huge value in getting it right, unquote. I believe we all agree with Professor Hawking, and we all want to get artificial intelligence right. The OECD will continue to promote multilateral cooperation in this crucial sector to ensure we bring together the best of human intellect and make the most out of machine intelligence, and to design, develop, and deliver better artificial intelligence policies for better life. What do you want to do with that? Thank you very much.
Tuan, are we going to present this to anybody?
Yes,
Or
we
just-
will bring it to send to Paris for him because we cannot come here. So this is a certificate to honor.
Why don't we ask our friends from
Yeah.
Mexico to come
Mexico
up here and
can to responsibility for human.
You honor?
Yes. He really want to come here, but he busy with the commitment event already. So he send a video.
Thank you, Governor.
joining us. Es un placer.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We got to shake.
Can I take one more from here? Sorry. Thank you very much.
That's it.
I think this is it. That's it, right? Thank you all very much for being with us today. This has been a terrific discussion and an education for a guy who got a charitable D in physics at Swarthmore College many years ago. And I just, before we wrap up, one of the other founding members of this organization arrived a little late. Tom, come on up and say a few words before we wrap up. Tom Patterson, folks, the Insurance Center.
All right, thank you. I had my first constituency all morning, so I was with my students, so I was unable to join you. But want to add my thanks to Mike's about all of you for being here. I think when Juan and Mike and I and John Paul sat down 5 years ago, thought about maybe we'd invent something called the Boston Global Forum. I think our visions look very much like what I see this morning. So I'm sorry I couldn't join you earlier. The reason I'm actually standing here is not to say that, however, but to make an announcement. It's a new program that's going to be part of the Economics Institute. We announced it in mid-February, but I'd like to speak about it again just in case you missed that announcement. What the program will do is to recognize high-level innovative leaders whose work has made a significant contribution to society. They could be artists, they could be writers, inventors, thought leaders, they could be leaders in business, politics, NGO. What we're looking for are individuals who, through innovation, have really made a difference in our lives. And we're going to be rolling out that first group fairly shortly. And we would love to have nominations from those of you in the room. Otherwise, we're going to end up with the usual suspects. And you know what that list looks like. And there's some very worthy, notable individuals who've made enormous contributions and often don't get the recognition that they deserve. And the way we look at these awards, that's a particular group that we'd like to focus on. So if you have some people we ought to be thinking about, please let us know. And again, I'm very grateful and I want to say just a quick word. I know you're anxious to get out. I need 30 seconds. I just want to signal out Juan for the contributions that he's made. I mean, this is an enormously effective, productive, wonderful network. You can't have a network if you don't have a hub. And Juan, more than anyone, has put together the Boston Global Forum. So, Juan, thank you so much.